A couple things about me that made it really suck to have a food thief. I have a lot of food allergies, so I can't just get lunch at the cafeteria or at a nearby restaurant. I have a new baby who I'm breastfeeding and who I pump for when I'm at work. You know how hungry pregnant people are. Yeah, the caloric requirement for breastfeeding is 100 to 200 calories higher. I am always hungry. Because I have a new baby, half the time I don't manage to show up at work with a lunch. I either run out of time to pack one, or if I did remember, I leave it on the counter. My solution to all of this was to leave lots of non-perishable snacks in my office, and also a lot of candy, because I also have a 3-year-old, and therefore work is the only place I can shovel Skittles into my mouth without a little hand extending into my field of vision, and a little voice saying, "Please." Snacks that were specifically free of my allergens, some of which were specialty foods because of this. The type of specialty food that just doesn't taste as good as food that contains the allergen, and also costs twice as much. Because I'm not getting a lot of sleep right now. I deserve nice things. So because I'm not getting a lot of sleep right now, when I first came back from maternity leave, assembled my snack hoard, and started having things go missing, I genuinely thought I was just losing my mind. Boxes of candy were running out faster than I thought I was eating them. I'd come in the morning and things wouldn't be where I'd left them. At one point I brought a bag of chips to work, folded the rim of the bag down so I wasn't plunging my arm elbow deep into a grease pit, and then put a bag clip on it when I went home. And when I came in the next morning the bag was unrolled and reclipped. I went, wow, I must be more tired than I thought. Rolled the bag back down, and the next morning it was unrolled again. Just little things like that, almost every day, that made me go, wow, the post-baby brain is worse than I thought. And then I got the flu. And I was out for a whole week. Left behind at the office was an almost full box of Enjoy Life cookies, which are not enjoyable, but are free of all major allergens, and are also $5 a box for, like, 12 sad little sand pies with some cinnamon on top. I ate one row of these cookies, and then I was out of the office for a week. For 1 week, I was not eating any of my snack hoard, but someone else was, because I came back to work, opened my box of cookies and found one. There was one single solitary cookie left, and on further examination, the one box of candy that had been opened was nowhere to be found. And on top of that, the thief had done me the courtesy of opening a new box for me, except that they actually followed the push here to open instructions instead of just ripping one end of the box open like I do, which they should damn well know at this point, because by this time they'd been stealing from me for 2 goddamn months. The combination of these two things, the sheer freaking audacity it takes to open a new box so you can continue stealing from someone, on top of the consumption of almost a whole box of specialty cookies that aren't even God, enraged me enough that, after going to my boss and getting some vague promises about checking if the security cameras in my wing of the building are functional or not, I went straight to Amazon and ordered myself a nanny cam. Not for my baby. For my snack hoard. Conveniently, it arrived the day before Valentine's Day. I set it up on top of the file cabinet looking down at my desk. On the desk, I laid out a fantastic spread of baked snacks. I got all my thief's favorites, and then I took it one step further. I bought myself a Valentine heart, broke the seal to make it more inviting, and left it out on my desk. The next morning, I came into some very obvious snack carnage. My thief had slowly been getting more brazen. Again, who opens a new box of something, and opens it differently than the person they are stealing from. But this was just on another level. Individually wrapped things had been dumped out of their boxes. Bits of packaging had been thrown away. And yup, they'd eaten some of the Valentine candy. For shame, office thief. Don't you know that's from someone who loves me? I played back the video. All was quiet throughout most of the evening, and I was just watching the shadows lengthen as the sun slowly set through the hallway window. And then, shortly before midnight, the night janitor arrived and went right ahead and took a 12-minute break in my office, sitting in my chair, eating my food. I started taking screenshots. I got him shoveling candy into his mouth with full palm-to-lips intensity, pouring things out onto the desk to pick his favorite flavors, not even bothering to put them back where he found them. And yes, eating my goddamn Valentine's candy. Screenshots went directly to my boss in an email. I went directly to my boss's door to hover and grin and ask if he'd read my email. And I got assurances of a strongly worded email to the cleaning company and the bearing of this particular employee from our place of business. I was also tactfully asked to please take my unauthorized spy camera home, which I did. I thought this was over, until the girl who works the concession stand dropped by to thank me. Apparently the food thief would start his shift just as she was closing down for the night, and would try to get free coffee in that creepy guy way. And then one of the reception staff came by with the same sentiments. I'd never met the guy face to face, but apparently, as a woman, it was not a fun experience to have. I'd shown my screenshots to a few coworkers and word had spread fast. I worked an earlier shift, so I didn't recognize him. But people whose shifts overlapped with his did. I hadn't told my husband about what I'd done because, when I came home raging about the blatant theft that had gone on while I'd had the flu, his only response had been, "You really shouldn't be leaving food at work then." But when I came home with the nanny cam and explained where and why I'd gotten it, his reaction surprised me. "You know, I think this is the first time I've seen you stand up for yourself. I'm proud of you." We don't own a car and live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It's not a huge deal to me. A little annoying when they compact the snow and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 a.m. I worked nights at the time. Half the time he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, but not if he's going to honk like that every morning, and especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him. He ignored it. I spoke with him and got, "What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it." To which I repeated that I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait till the kid notices he's there or, God forbid, he have to drag his ass out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway. He just ran over it. I called the dispatch for the ride service and was told they are subcontractors and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I wake up the next day to pounding on my door. Dude is pissed. Him. "How dare you call my boss, you stupid piece of shit? What the fuck is wrong with you?" Me. "Well, it's quite simple. You were told not to use my driveway if you were going drive on my lawn and wake me up every morning. Now get off my doorstep." Him. "I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you." Me. "You've been warned. Don't trespass on my driveway or property again." Dude storms off in a huff spouting obscenities, etc. So this happened on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day, and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40 Celsius. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up, so it's freaking cold lol. So that night, I grabbed one of my more beat-up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that read "Private Property, Driveway Not for Public Use," and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees the garbage can, backs up a bit more and defiantly charges the garbage can as if to teach me a lesson and proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. Dude gets out fuming, calls the cops, and comes pounding on my door, screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. Cop: so let me make sure I understand this situation. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. Now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property. I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said, "Yeah, that's not how this works," and turned to me and asking if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I just gave him the most shit-eating grin I could muster and said, "Nah, I think we're good." I then went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold waiting for a tow truck and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. Edit: thanks for the silver and gold. More edits for closure. No, I never saw him again. As far as the police officer, I wasn't aware that it wasn't up to me, and he didn't say anything about it either. I assume he really didn't want to have to bother with the paperwork and thought I may have gotten upset if he'd said, "Well, I don't see the need to press charges at this point." So he made it seem like it was my choice. Source: I'm somewhat lazy and would likely do the same. A cul-de-sac can also be used to describe a street with no exit, which is exactly where my home is. It's easier for them to use my driveway than three-point turn their way out like Austin Powers. I was drinking morning coffee because they were 6 p.m. 2 a.m. shits. So nights but not quite overnights, and I usually got up at around 10 a.m. Every time he'd wake me up around 8 or so I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep, hence why I needed him to stop. Finally, I really appreciate all the love and comments this post has received. I assumed a few would get a laugh, but holy crap. I wasn't prepared for this kind of reaction. That being said, I find the sheer number of comments I need to reply to quite overwhelming for my somewhat introverted self. So on that note, I'm out and leave all this accumulated karma to be sacrificed to the Reddit gods. I spend way too much time on here anyways. Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's. Both of us really proud. This is gonna be long, so TLDR at bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story Sisters ex-BF. Paul ex-BF's new wife. Jane ex-BF's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Dahl, oldest brother. Zeke, our parents, and me. When I was 14 and my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged, and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy, about 16 to 18 weeks, and the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hypermesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that, and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork, as she should have been put of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16, and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished, and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Grape Lips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been, infrequently, paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, "I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Braintley. You know the ones I'm talking about." And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said, "What about Sarah?" My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name, and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her, and to also remind him to pay his ********* child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who is really great and like a father to Val. TLDR, my sister's baby daddy forged her signature on paperwork while she was in surgery to name their son a name that she had been avidly against from the beginning, then broke all contact when she dumped him and married the girl he was cheating on her with while she was pregnant. 6 years later, I meet his wife and convince her to name her daughter my sister's name because the wife has no idea my sister and her son exist.